Welcome to the Sleeping Times channel. Tonight we bring you a story that will transport you directly to a time when celebrating the winter solstice was much more than just marking a date on the calendar. It was participating in the most sacred and transformative ritual humanity ever created to honor nature's eternal cycles. Imagine a world where every movement of the stars mattered, where the exact moment of sunrise was calculated with mathematical precision by sages who dedicated decades to studying the heavens, where a simple bonfire became a sacred portal between the physical and spiritual worlds. And what if I told you that 2,000 years ago, Celtic Druids created solstice celebrations that engaged all the senses in a way our modern experience has lost forever? Discover how our ancestors transformed the longest night of the year into a human symphony of spiritual resilience, where each person was simultaneously a guardian of light and a witness to a cosmic miracle that had repeated for millennia. A celebration where children and elders, artisans and warriors all had sacred roles to play in the world's great annual renewal. If you enjoy stories that move, surprise, and make you think about how we live today, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss anything. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. And tell me, have you ever participated in a celebration that deeply connected you with nature and other people? And remember, throughout the week, we bring new adventures and incredible eras waiting to inspire you. Are you ready to embark on this journey through the sacred groves of the past? Then make yourself comfortable, turn off the lights if you want a more immersive experience, and prepare to discover how a solstice night was truly a living spiritual work of art. In the morning mists that enveloped the ancient forests of Brittany, when the world still breathed in harmony with celestial cycles, there existed a wisdom that deeply connected human beings to the rhythms of nature. It was the time of the Druids, guardians of ancestral knowledge who understood every whisper of the wind, every movement of the stars, every beat of the earth's heart. In these remote times, approximately 2,000 years ago, Celtic communities lived in perfect harmony with the seasons, and no moment was more sacred than the winter solstice, the rebirth of light amidst the deepest darkness of the year. Preparations for this sacred celebration began weeks before the astronomical event itself. In villages scattered across the green hills of present-day Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and France, people carefully observed nature's signs. The golden leaves of the oak, the most revered tree by the Celts, slowly fell, creating a crunchy carpet under the bare feet of those who walked through the sacred groves. The air grew colder and more crystalline, carrying with it the earthy aroma of decaying leaves mixed with the resinous scent of pines that remained green, symbolizing the eternal life that persisted even in the darkest moments. In the stone circles spread across the landscape, monuments we now know as Stonehenge, Newgrange, and hundreds of other megalithic sites, the Druids performed precise astronomical observations. These wise men and women, dressed in white linen tunics embroidered with golden Celtic symbols, spent entire nights contemplating the starry sky. Their astronomical knowledge was surprisingly advanced. They could calculate with mathematical precision the exact moment the sun would reach its lowest point on the horizon, marking the beginning of light's gradual return to the world. Spiritual preparation was as important as scientific observation. During the days leading up to the solstice, the Druids fasted, meditated in sacred caves, and performed purification rituals in crystalline springs considered portals between the physical and spiritual worlds. They believed that during this period, the veil between worlds became thinner, allowing for more direct communication with ancestors and with the primordial forces of nature. The The sound of their voices chanting ancient songs echoed through the forests, creating an atmosphere of reverence and expectation that spread throughout the community. The women of the village, known as druidesses, played fundamental roles in this preparation. They collected sacred herbs, mistletoe, holly, ivy, and yew branches, which would be used in the rituals. Each plant had its specific meaning. Mistletoe, growing on oak branches without touching the ground, represented the connection between sky and earth. Holly, with its pointed leaves and red berries, symbolized protection and vitality that persisted in winter. Ivy, evergreen and resilient, represented fidelity and the continuity of life. The community's artisans worked tirelessly creating special ritual objects for the ceremony. Bronze cauldrons were polished until they shone like mirrors, reflecting the light of the torches that would illuminate the sacred night. Oak staves were carefully carved with spiral symbols, representations of the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Crowns of intertwined branches were woven with artistic precision, destined to adorn the heads of the most important participants in the ceremony. Music was also prepared with special care. The bards, sacred poets and musicians of Celtic culture, composed specific songs for the solstice, melodies that imitated the sounds of nature, the murmur of streams, the whisper of the wind in the leaves, the crackle of flames. Their wooden harps, decorated with intricate carvings of totemic animals such as deer, boars, and ravens, were tuned to tones that, according to Druidic belief, resonated with the vibrational frequencies of the earth itself. The children of the village participated in the preparations by learning ancestral traditions through stories told by the elders. Sitting around the hearths, with eyes gleaming with curiosity and admiration, they listened to accounts of how the first Druids discovered the secrets of the solar cycles, how they learned to read the signs in the stars, and how they developed the wisdom that allowed the community to live in harmony with natural forces. These stories were not just entertainment, they were the way sacred knowledge was transmitted from generation to generation. Food also received special attention during this preparatory period. Families saved the best foods from the autumn harvest for the solstice feast: golden apples preserved in honey, crunchy nuts, cheeses aged in stone cellars, mead fermented with aromatic herbs. These foods were not just physical sustenance, each carried symbolic meanings related to abundance, the preservation of life during winter, and gratitude for nature's gifts. As the solstice day approached, a special energy hung in the air. It was as if nature itself held its breath, awaiting the sacred moment when the light would begin its journey of return. Animals seemed quieter, trees whispered ancient secrets to the wind, and even the stones of the megalithic circles seemed to vibrate with a subtle, mysterious energy. It was in this atmosphere of sacred expectation and careful preparation that the Druids prepared to perform one of the most important ceremonies of the entire Celtic year. The Druids were not merely priests or healers, they represented the intellectual elite of Celtic society, combining in their persons the roles of philosophers, scientists, physicians, judges, teachers, and guardians of collective memory. To become a complete Druid, a young person dedicated approximately 20 years of their life to intensive study, memorizing thousands of verses that contained all the wisdom accumulated over generations. This oral tradition was considered too sacred to be entrusted to writing. It was believed that true knowledge should live in the mind and heart, not in dead symbols carved in stone or parchment. The Druidic hierarchy was complex and well-structured, reflecting different levels of knowledge and responsibility. At the top were the Archdruids, venerable elders who had dedicated their entire lives to the study and practice of ancestral wisdom. These supreme masters wore white tunics embroidered with gold threads, symbolizing their direct connection to sunlight and their spiritual authority over the entire community. Their oak staves, polished by decades of use, were inlaid with precious stones that, according to tradition, amplified their capacities for spiritual perception and communication with invisible worlds. Below the arch-druids were the full druids, men and women who had completed their training and were responsible for specific communities. They wore fine linen tunics dyed with natural pigments, blue extracted from woad, red from madder, yellow from saffron, each color indicating their particular specialization. Druids specializing in healing wore green, the color of regenerative nature. Those focused on astronomy wore deep blue like the night sky. Those dedicated to justice and laws wore purple, the color of authority and wisdom. The Ovates formed the intermediate level of the hierarchy, being druids specialized in prophecy, dream interpretation, and communication with the spiritual world. They were easily recognized by their brown tunics, the color of the earth symbolizing their connection to chthonic forces and their ability to interpret nature's hidden signs. During the preparations for the solstice, the Ovates entered deep meditative states, seeking visions about the year to come and spiritual guidance for the community. At the base of the hierarchy were the bards, no less important, but with specific functions related to the preservation and transmission of culture through music, poetry, and storytelling. Their instruments, harps, bone flutes, deer-hide drums, were considered sacred, capable of inducing altered states of consciousness and facilitating communication with the spiritual world. During the solstice, the bards played a crucial role, as their songs and stories created the right atmosphere for the rituals and helped the community connect emotionally with the deep meaning of the celebration. The Druidic training process was rigorous and transformative. Young candidates, usually chosen in childhood, for demonstrating special aptitudes, exceptional memory, spiritual sensitivity, ability to perceive patterns in nature, were taken to sacred groves where they lived in learning communities. There, under the guidance of experienced masters, they memorized not only sacred texts, but also practical knowledge about astronomy, herbal medicine, meteorology, agriculture, and the complex Celtic laws that governed all aspects of social life. Druidic education emphasized direct observation of nature as the primary source of knowledge. Students spent hours contemplating the movement of stars, the growth of plants, the behavior of animals, and weather patterns. They learned to read the subtle signs that nature constantly offered, how the shape of clouds could predict changes in weather, how the behavior of birds indicated the proximity of seasons, how the phases of the moon influence plant growth and animal reproductive cycles. Druidic medicine was particularly sophisticated, based on a deep knowledge of the healing properties of plants and the understanding that physical health was intimately connected with spiritual and emotional balance. The Druids knew hundreds of medicinal herbs and knew how to combine them to treat various ailments. They also practiced primitive forms of surgery and had advanced knowledge of human anatomy, acquired through centuries of careful observation and experimentation. During the period leading up to the solstice, the Druids intensified their spiritual practices, performing purifying fasts and prolonged meditations in sacred caves or on isolated hilltops. They believed that this period of inner preparation was essential for them to serve as suitable channels for the cosmic energies that would manifest during the ceremony. Their minds, purified by discipline and study, became receptive to the subtle influences that governed natural cycles. The Druids' responsibility during the solstice went far beyond the mere conduct of rituals. They were the guardians of sacred time, responsible for calculating with astronomical precision the exact moment of the ceremony, interpreting the celestial and earthly signs that indicated the will of the gods, and guiding the community through the symbolic transition from darkness to light. Their calm presence and spiritual authority provided the community with the assurance that the ancient pacts with the forces of nature would be honored and renewed once more. As the first stars began to dot the violet evening sky, the community slowly made its way to the sacred circle, a monument of standing stones that had been built by ancestors hundreds, sometimes thousands of years prior. These megalithic circles, scattered across the Celtic landscape, were not merely impressive constructions. They were precise astronomical observatories, open-air temples, and symbolic portals between the physical and spiritual worlds. Each stone had been carefully positioned to capture and channel cosmic energies, creating a space where the sacred could manifest with particular intensity. The stones of the circle, some weighing several tons, had been transported from distant quarries using methods that still defy our complete understanding today. The ancient builders chose specific types of rock, not only for their durability, but also for their acoustic and energetic properties. Granite, with its quartz crystals, was valued for its ability to amplify vibrations. Red sandstone was chosen for its symbolic connection to the earth's blood. White limestone represented purity and sunlight. Each stone was treated as a living being with its own personality and power. The main circle was often surrounded by auxiliary structures that enhanced its astronomical and ritual functionality. Trails of smaller stones called avenues extended in specific directions, aligned with important points on the horizon where the sun and moon rose or set on significant dates. These avenues were not just physical paths, they were energy corridors that directed and focused cosmic forces towards the center of the circle, where the most important rituals were performed. At the center of the circle, a specially shaped altar stone, often a flat slab of polished granite, served as the focal point for the ceremonies. This central stone was considered the heart of the monument, the place where earthly and celestial energies met and balanced. Its surface, smooth as a mirror, reflected the light of the stars and torches, creating a hypnotic visual effect that helped participants enter altered states of consciousness conducive to spiritual experience. Around the main circle, smaller stone altars mark the cardinal directions and intermediate points, each dedicated to different aspects of Celtic divinity. The eastern altar, where the sun rose, was decorated with symbols of renewal and new beginnings. The western one, where the sun set, honored ancestors and accumulated wisdom. The northern one represented stability and the strength of the earth. The southern one symbolized growth and abundance. These smaller altars were adorned with specific offerings, flowers, fruits, crystals, precious metal objects. The acoustics of the stone circle were extraordinary, a result of precise calculations made by the ancient architects. When someone spoke or sang in the center of the circle, their voice was amplified and evenly distributed to all points of the circumference, allowing hundreds of people to clearly hear even the softest whispers. This acoustic effect was not accidental. It transformed the circle into a gigantic musical instrument where every word spoken by the Druids gained special power and resonance. The individual stones of the circle had specific names and personalities, passed down through generations by oral tradition. There was the Stone of Wisdom, where the oldest Druids positioned themselves during ceremonies. The Stone of Healing, touched by those seeking relief from ailments. The Stone of Dreams, where young people slept in the hope of receiving prophetic visions. Each of these stones had accumulated over the centuries the energies and intentions of thousands of people who touched them with reverence and faith. During the solstice, the stone circle transformed into a miniature cosmos, a three-dimensional model of the universe where each element had its specific place and function. The torches placed between the stones represented the stars. The central fire symbolized the sun. The participants, moving in circular patterns, mimicked the movement of the planets. This representation was not merely symbolic. The Druids believed that by recreating the cosmos on a human scale, they could influence and harmonize real cosmic forces. The preparation of the circle for the solstice ceremony was a ritual in itself. For days, groups of volunteers carefully swept the space between the stones, removing dry leaves and fallen branches. The stones were washed with water from sacred springs and polished with white linen cloths until they shone under the starlight. Garlands of sacred plants, oak, mistletoe, holly, were intertwined between the stones, creating a natural decoration that connected the ancient monument with the surrounding plant life. As the solstice night approached, the stone circle seemed to awaken from a millennial slumber. The shadows of the stones cast by the light of the waxing moon created complex geometric patterns on the ground, as if the monument itself were writing secret messages on the earth. The wind circulating between the stones produced subtle sounds, whispers, soft moans, ethereal harmonies, which the Druids interpreted as the voice of the ancestors giving their blessings for the ceremony to come. It was in this environment charged with history, mystery, and spiritual power that the Celtic community gathered to celebrate the return of light to the world. In the weeks leading up to the winter solstice, one of the most important and delicate activities was the harvesting of sacred plants that would be used in the rituals. This was not a simple gathering of vegetation. It was a complex ceremonial process that required deep knowledge, precise timing, and spiritual reverence. Each plant had its ideal moment for harvesting, its own ritual requirements, and its specific symbolic meanings that connected with the mysteries of the solstice and the eternal cycle of death and rebirth. Mistletoe was, without a doubt, the most sacred of all Celtic plants, especially when found growing on oak branches, a combination considered extremely rare and powerful. The Druids believed that mistletoe, by growing between heaven and earth without ever touching the ground, was a direct gift from the gods, a living bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. The harvesting of mistletoe was surrounded by elaborate rituals. It could only be cut with a golden sickle during the 6th night after the new moon, and it could never touch the ground, being caught in pure white linen cloths. The expedition to gather mistletoe was led by the arch-druid, accompanied by a retinue of lesser druids dressed in ceremonial robes. They walked in silence through the sacred forest, their bare feet gently touching the damp earth covered with golden leaves. The sound of their footsteps was muffled by the thick layer of humus, creating an atmosphere of reverence and mystery. When they finally found an oak with mistletoe, everyone knelt in a circle around the tree, chanting ancient songs that thanked the tree for its generosity and asked permission to harvest its sacred gift. Holly, with its intensely green, pointed leaves and blood-red berries, was harvested in specific groves where it grew naturally. This plant represented protection and vitality that persisted even in the darkest moments of winter. The Druidesses were traditionally responsible for harvesting holly, as it was believed that their feminine energy harmonized best with the plant's protective spirit. They approached each bush humming softly, their melodious voices blending with the whisper of the wind in the leaves. Ivy, evergreen and resilient, symbolized fidelity and the continuity of life through all seasons. Its harvesting required special care, as the plant had to be removed from its natural support, usually ancient tree trunks, without damaging either the ivy or the host tree. The Druids developed specific techniques for this harvest, using razor-sharp bronze knives and precise movements that cut only the necessary branches, allowing the plant to continue growing and thriving. Yew, a tree associated with immortality due to its extraordinary longevity, some specimens lived for over 1,000 years, provided branches that were considered bridges between life and death. The harvesting of yew branches was performed only by experienced druids, as the tree was poisonous and required careful handling. The chosen branches were always those that the tree itself offered naturally, dry branches or those broken by the wind, never cut from living, healthy parts. In addition to the main plants, dozens of other plant species were collected for specific uses during the solstice. Birch branches, with their silvery white bark, were used for purification. Golden oak leaves from autumn represented accumulated wisdom. Elderberries were harvested to prepare ritual drinks. Soft mosses were collected to line the altars. Colourful lichens were used to create natural dyes for ceremonial body painting. The preparation of the plants after harvesting was as important as the harvest itself. Each plant species was treated according to its specific properties and ritual uses. Mistletoe was carefully dried in the shade, preserving its silvery green colour and energetic properties. Holly was kept fresh in pure water containers, its shiny leaves and red berries retaining all their vitality. Ivy was intertwined into complex garlands, its flexible branches forming geometric patterns that mimicked sacred Celtic symbols. Aromatic herbs received special treatment, being dried in bundles hung from the ceilings of the Druidic huts. The aroma that spread through these spaces was intoxicating, a complex mixture of earthy, resinous, and floral fragrances that created an atmosphere conducive to meditation and spiritual work. Sage, thyme, rosemary, lavender. Each herb contributed its specific note to this olfactory symphony that prepared the senses for the transcendent experience of the solstice. Throughout the entire harvesting and preparation process, the Druids maintained a state of elevated consciousness, treating each plant as a conscious being worthy of respect and gratitude. They believed that plants absorbed the intentions and emotions of those who handled them, and therefore it was essential to maintain pure thoughts and feelings of reverence throughout the work. This approach not only ensured that the plants retained their maximum energetic properties, but also created a deep spiritual connection between the gatherers and the plant world. As the day of the solstice approached, all the sacred plants were arranged in specific formations on the preparatory altars. Each arrangement told a symbolic story: the persistence of life through darkness, the promise of renewal, the eternal connection between all living beings. The gentle perfume emanating from these botanical arrangements created a unique atmosphere, transporting all present to an altered state of consciousness where the spiritual world seemed closer and more accessible. While the Druids dedicated themselves to the spiritual and ritual aspects of preparation, the entire Celtic community mobilized to create a celebration that would adequately honor the cosmic importance of the winter solstice. This collective mobilization was not just a matter of practical organization, it was an expression of the social and spiritual unity that characterized Celtic culture, where each individual had a specific role to play in the great communal ritual that would renew the bonds between humanity and the forces of nature. The women of the village took responsibility for preparing the ritual foods, a task that required not only culinary skill, but also a deep knowledge of the symbolic meanings of each ingredient. For weeks they worked together in communal kitchens, their voices blending in traditional songs as they prepared special sun-shaped breads, honey cakes decorated with Celtic symbols, and fermented drinks that would be consumed during the ceremony. The aroma of spices, cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, spread through the village, creating a festive and welcoming atmosphere. The men dedicated themselves to building and maintaining the structures necessary for the celebration. They erected wooden platforms around the stone circle to accommodate musicians and storytellers. They built temporary shelters to protect food and drinks from the night wind. They prepared large bonfires at strategic points, carefully stacking dry logs of different types of wood: oak for strength, birch for purification, ash for protection, each contributing its specific properties to the sacred fire. Children actively participated in the preparations, learning through practice the traditions they would one day pass on to their own children. They helped weave garlands of sacred plants, their small, nimble hands intertwining holly and ivy branches under the careful guidance of adults. Groups of children roamed the village collecting special stones, smooth pebbles from streams, crystals found in caves, interestingly shaped rocks, which would be used to decorate the altars and create sacred geometric patterns on the ground around the main circle. The community's artisans worked intensely, creating special objects for the ceremony. Blacksmiths forged small bronze and iron amulets in the shape of the sun, moon, and stars, which would be distributed as blessings for the new year. Potters molded ceremonial vessels, offering bowls, jugs for sacred drinks, oil lamps that would illuminate the altars. Weavers created bands and banners decorated with traditional Celtic patterns, their vibrant colors: blue, green, gold, red, symbolizing different aspects of nature and spirituality. The preparation of ceremonial garments was an art in itself. Each family owned special clothes kept specifically for sacred occasions like the solstice. These garments were made of fine linen or soft wool, dyed with natural pigments extracted from local plants. The embroideries that decorated these clothes told stories: spirals representing the eternal cycle of life, triskells symbolizing the union between the three worlds: physical, mental, and spiritual, Celtic knots indicating the interconnectedness of all things. Each stitched point was a prayer, each pattern an invocation of protection and blessing. The community's musicians, not just the professional bards but also amateur artists with musical talent, intensively rehearsed traditional solstice songs. Their voices harmonized in ancient melodies that imitated the sounds of nature: the murmur of streams, the whisper of the wind, the crackle of flames. Instruments were tuned and decorated especially for the occasion: harps adorned with colorful ribbons, polished wooden flutes shining, drums covered with animal skins painted with sacred symbols. The cleaning and purification of the entire village was another important aspect of the preparation. All houses were swept and washed, not just for hygiene, but as a ritual of spiritual purification that prepared the physical space to receive the sacred energies of the solstice. Aromatic herbs were burned in braziers scattered throughout the village, their fragrant smoke carrying prayers and intentions to the heavens. Springs and wells were cleaned and decorated with flowers and colorful stones, honoring the water spirits that sustained the community's life. The village elders played a special role during this period, sharing their memories of past celebrations and guiding the younger generations on the correct protocols and traditions. Their experienced voices narrated stories about memorable solstices of the past, creating a temporal continuity that connected the current celebration with hundreds of years of ancestral tradition. They also supervised the preparations, ensuring that every detail was executed according to established customs. As the day of the solstice approached, the entire village vibrated with a special energy. People moved with renewed purpose, their faces illuminated by anticipation and joyful expectation. Lively conversations about the preparations mingled with moments of silent contemplation, creating a unique atmosphere where the sacred and the everyday harmoniously intertwined. It was as if the entire community was participating in a grand symphony, each person contributing their specific note to create a collective harmony that would adequately honor the most sacred moment of the Celtic year. As the sun began its final descent on the western horizon, painting the sky with shades of amber, orange, and deep purple, the entire Celtic community knew that the most sacred moment of the year had arrived. This was the night of the winter solstice, when darkness would reach its peak and, paradoxically, mark the beginning of light's gradual return to the world. The air was crisp and cold, each breath creating small clouds of vapor that quickly dissipated in the chilly air. The first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, like diamonds set in deep blue velvet. The entire village transformed into a human river, slowly flowing towards the sacred stone circle. Families walked together carrying torches that created dancing points of light in the twilight landscape. The torch flames flickered gently in the night breeze, casting moving shadows that seemed to bring the trees and rocks along the path to life. The sound of footsteps on the frozen ground mingled with whispered conversations and the soft jingle of small bells sewn into ceremonial clothing. Children walked hand in hand with their parents, their eyes gleaming with excitement and a touch of reverent apprehension. They wore their finest clothes, soft wool tunics dyed in vibrant colors, cloaks lined with rabbit fur, leather shoes decorated with intricate embroidery. Some carried small offerings they had specially prepared for the occasion, woven straw dolls, wreaths of dried flowers, polished pebbles they had found in streams. Their high-pitched voices blended into simple songs they had learned especially for this night. Adults moved with solemn dignity, aware of the importance of the moment they were experiencing. Women wore their most beautiful dresses, fine linen fabrics embroidered with golden threads, colorful wool shawls, bronze and amber jewelry that caught and reflected the torchlight. Their hair was elaborately styled and decorated with ribbons and small preserved flowers. Men wore tunics of earthy colors, brown, moss green, deep blue, with worked leather belts and metal brooches indicating their status in the community. As the procession approached the stone circle, the atmosphere became increasingly charged with anticipation and reverence. The megalithic monument stood majestic against the starry sky, its ancient stones seeming to absorb and radiate a mysterious energy. Torches had been lit at strategic points around the circle, creating a ring of light that transformed the sacred space into a miniature cosmos, where every shadow and every reflection held symbolic meaning. The Druids were already positioned within the circle, their imposing figures standing out against the dark stones. The Archdruid occupied the center, near the main altar, his white tunic shining like snow under the starlight. Around him, the other Druids positioned themselves according to their specialties and hierarchies. The astronomy experts facing east, where the sun would rise, the healers near the medicinal plant altars, the bards with their musical instruments ready to accompany the ritual chants. The central fire had not yet been lit. This would be one of the most important parts of the ceremony. The firewood was carefully arranged in a perfect pyramid, with logs of different sacred woods arranged in specific patterns. At the base, dry oak branches would provide a solid foundation. Above, birch branches would add purification. At the top, ash branches would offer protection. Between the layers of wood, aromatic herbs, sage, thyme, rosemary, waited to release their sacred perfumes when the flames touched them. The community naturally organized itself around the stone circle, forming concentric rings of people. The oldest and most respected occupied the positions closest to the sacred stones, followed by families with children, and finally by young adults in the outer rows. This organization was not rigid or imposed. It flowed naturally from the collective understanding of social hierarchy and spiritual proximity. Everyone found their appropriate place without conflict or confusion. The silence that settled over the gathered crowd was deep and reverent. It was a living silence charged with anticipation and concentrated spiritual energy. Only the natural sounds of the night could be heard, the soft whisper of the wind in the nearby trees, the occasional crackle of the torches, the distant hoot of an owl calling in the forest. These natural sounds did not break the silence. They enriched it, reminding everyone present that they were participating in a ritual that intimately connected them with the natural world. The stars shone with special intensity on this clear winter night, their cold lights contrasting with the golden warmth of the earthly torches. The Milky Way stretched like a luminous bridge across the sky, symbolically connecting the world of humans with the realm of the gods. The Druids carefully observed the constellations, awaiting the astronomically precise moment to begin the main ceremony. Each star, each visible planet had its meaning in Celtic cosmology, and its position on this specific night would influence the blessings and prophecies for the coming year. As the night deepened and the cold intensified, the gathered community prepared to witness and participate in one of humanity's oldest and most powerful rituals, the celebration of light's return amidst the deepest darkness, the renewal of hope when all seemed lost, the reaffirmation of faith in the continuity of life, even in the face of the apparent death of the natural world. At the exact moment calculated by the Druids, when the constellations reached their precise positions and cosmic energy achieved its point of greatest concentration, the Archdruid slowly moved to the center of the circle, where the wood pyramid awaited the sacred touch of fire. His movements were deliberate and majestic, each step laden with ritualistic meaning. In his hands he carried a special oak staff polished by decades of ceremonial use, at whose end was fixed a quartz crystal that captured and focused the starlight. The silence of the crowd deepened even further, if that were possible. It was as if hundreds of people had become a single entity breathing in unison, their hearts beating to the same ancestral rhythm that had guided their forebears through thousands of previous solstices. The cold night air seemed to vibrate with invisible energy, charged with anticipation and reverence. Even the smallest children remained quiet, instinctively understanding the solemnity of the moment. The Archdruid raised his staff towards the starry sky, and his deep, melodious voice echoed through the stone circle, amplified by the monument's natural acoustics. He chanted an ancient invocation in Gaelic, words that had been preserved through generations by Druidic oral tradition. Although many in the crowd did not fully comprehend the literal meaning of the archaic words, all felt their emotional and spiritual power. It was a prayer addressed to the Celtic gods, Lugh, the god of light, Brigid, the goddess of sacred fire, Cernunnos, the lord of animals and wild nature. As the invocation continued, other druids moved to specific positions around the wood pyramid. Each carried symbolic elements that would be incorporated into the ritual. Pure water from sacred springs to represent the aquatic element, earth salt to symbolize the terrestrial element, aromatic incense to invoke the aerial element. The fire about to be lit would represent the fourth element, thus completing the cosmic harmony necessary for an effective ritual. The method of lighting the sacred fire was in itself a complex and significant ritual. The Archdruid did not use mundane methods like flint or embers from common bonfires. Instead, he employed the ancestral technique of creating fire through friction, using specific woods that had been specially prepared and consecrated for this purpose. 2 pieces of dry oak wood, a flat base with a small notch and a cylindrical rod, were the sacred instruments for this primordial creation. With rhythmic and precise movements, the Archdruid began to spin the wooden rod in the notch of the base, creating friction that gradually heated the wood fibers. This process required not only physical technique, but also intense spiritual concentration. Each movement was accompanied by controlled breathing and mental focus directed towards the intention of bringing light into the world. The crowd watched in absolute silence, their own mental energies directed to support the chief priest's effort. Small particles of heated wood began to form at the point of friction, glowing like tiny earthly stars. The Archdruid gently blew on these incandescent particles, feeding them with oxygen until a small golden flame emerged like a miracle from the darkness. This first flame was carefully transferred to a nest of dry fibers, moss, shredded birch bark, aromatic herbs, that had been specifically prepared to receive and nurture the nascent fire. As the flame grew and strengthened, it was transferred to progressively larger branches, following a careful progression that ensured the fire would not extinguish. First, thin twigs like matchsticks, then finger-sized branches, next, arm-sized limbs, finally, the larger logs of the main pyramid. Each stage of this progression was accompanied by specific chants, creating a vocal symphony that grew in intensity along with the flames. When the fire finally reached its full strength, illuminating the entire stone circle with a golden, dancing light, a roar of joy and relief rose from the crowd. It was as if life itself had returned to the world after a period of deadly dormancy. The flames leapt and danced, casting moving shadows on the ancient stones and the radiant faces of the celebrants. The heat of the fire spread in concentric waves, warming not only the bodies, but also the spirits of all present. The sacred fire was not just a source of light and warmth, it was considered a living portal between the physical and spiritual worlds. The flames dancing towards the sky carried the community's prayers and intentions to the gods, while the light, radiating downwards, brought divine blessings back to earth. Every rising spark was seen as an ancestral soul visiting the celebration, every crackle of the flames interpreted as a message from the invisible worlds. As the fire settled into a steady burning rhythm, the Druids began to add special offerings to the flames. Grains of different cereals, wheat, barley, oats, representing the abundance of the harvest and the hope of future fertility. Drops of honey symbolizing the sweetness of life and nature's generosity. Small objects of personal value, rings, amulets, coins, offered as sacrifices to ensure divine protection during the coming year. Each offering was accompanied by a specific prayer, creating a continuous chain of communication between humanity and the divine. With the sacred fire established as the ceremony's pulsating heart, the bards emerged from the shadows carrying their sacred musical instruments. Their polished wooden harps gleamed in the firelight, the animal gut strings tuned to pitches that, according to Druidic tradition, resonated with the earth's own vibrational frequencies. The deer-hide drums, decorated with Celtic symbols painted in natural pigments, awaited the touch that would awaken the ancestral rhythms that had echoed through millennia of solstice celebrations. The first sound to emerge was that of a bone flute, its ethereal and melancholic melody floating over the silent crowd like the voice of an ancestral spirit. The pure, crystalline note seemed to come from another world, carrying with it memories of bygone eras when the first Celts discovered the secrets of the solar cycles. Gradually, other flutes joined the first, creating complex harmonies that imitated the sounds of nature, the whisper of the wind through oak leaves, the murmur of streams flowing over smooth stones, the distant call of migratory birds. The harps entered next, their strings plucked with masterful precision by the most experienced bards. Each note was like a drop of sonorous light falling into the darkness, creating concentric waves of harmony that spread through the gathered crowd. The bards did not merely play music, they wove sonic enchantments that subtly altered the listener's state of consciousness, preparing them for deeper spiritual experiences. The harp melodies intertwined like golden threads, creating a musical tapestry that told the story of the Celtic cosmos. When the drums finally joined the symphony, it was as if the very heart of the earth began to beat. The deep, hypnotic rhythm echoed through the celebrants' bodies, synchronizing their heartbeats with the ancestral pulse that had guided their forebears through countless generations. The drums did not just mark time, they created a temporal bridge that connected the present with the mythical past, allowing participants to feel the living presence of all those who had celebrated the solstice before them. The first chant began as a collective whisper, hundreds of voices uniting in an ancient melody that had been orally transmitted through centuries. The words were in archaic Gaelic, a language that preserved not only literal meanings, but also specific vibratory powers. Each syllable had been carefully preserved because the Druids believed that certain combinations of sounds could directly influence natural and spiritual forces. The chant gradually grew in volume and intensity like a sound wave rising from the depths of the collective soul. The female voices stood out in high, crystalline harmonies, their pure notes cutting through the cold night air like silver blades. They sang about Brigid, the goddess of sacred fire and poetic inspiration, invoking her presence to bless the ceremony with creativity and spiritual renewal. The male voices provided a deep and resonant bass, their low tones vibrating through the listeners' bodies and creating a sense of stability and strength. Together, the voices created a perfect harmony that symbolized the complementary union between the masculine and feminine principles of nature. As the music intensified, groups of dancers emerged from the crowd, their movements flowing naturally from the hypnotic rhythms. The Celtic Solstice dance was not a performance for entertainment. It was a form of bodily prayer, a way to use physical movement to channel and direct spiritual energies. The dancers moved in circular patterns around the central fire, their steps following choreographic sequences that had been preserved through generations as sacred forms of knowledge. The women danced with fluid, undulating movements, their long skirts swirling like giant flower petals. They carried colorful ribbons that created arcs and spirals in the air, painting ephemeral patterns against the dark backdrop of the night. Their movements mimicked natural cycles, the growth of plants, the flow of water, the movement of clouds in the sky. Every gesture had symbolic meaning, every step told part of the cosmic story of the eternal return of light. The men performed more vigorous and rhythmic dances, their movements evoking the strength of natural elements, the power of the wind, the solidity of the earth, the energy of fire. They leapt over smaller flames that had been lit around the main fire, an act of courage and purification that symbolized the overcoming of fears and spiritual renewal. Their ritualistic cries, not words, but pure expressions of vital energy, echoed through the stone circle like primordial calls that awakened dormant forces. The children participated in the dance with simpler, yet no less significant movements. They formed smaller circles within the larger circles of the adults, their high-pitched voices adding notes of innocence and hope to the collective symphony. Their spontaneous laughter and exclamations of joy reminded everyone present that the solstice celebration was, fundamentally, a celebration of life and the continuity of generations. Less common instruments also made their special appearances during specific moments of the ceremony. Rattles made from dried gourds, filled with seeds, created whispering rhythms that imitated the sound of rain. Small bronze bells, played in specific sequences, produced crystalline harmonies that, according to Druidic belief, could purify the air of negative influences. Horns made from animal antlers emitted deep, resonant sounds that carried messages over long distances, communicating to other communities that the ritual was underway. The music and dance did not follow a rigid or predetermined structure. Instead, they flowed organically, responding to the subtle energies that manifested during the ceremony. Experienced bards served as invisible conductors, subtly guiding the musical evolution through discrete signals and rhythm changes. They knew when to intensify the energy for moments of collective ecstasy and when to soften the sounds to allow for moments of silent contemplation. As the night progressed and the music continued, many participants entered altered states of consciousness induced by the combination of hypnotic rhythms, repetitive movements, and the atmosphere charged with spiritual energy. These states were not considered abnormal or dangerous. On the contrary, they were seen as signs that the ceremony was fulfilling its purpose of connecting participants with deeper spiritual realities. It was in these moments of expanded consciousness that many received visions, insights, or experiences of direct communion with divine forces. When the music and dances reached their climax and gradually softened to a more contemplative rhythm, the most personal and intimate moment of the solstice ceremony arrived, the time for individual offerings and vows for the nascent year. This was the moment when each community member could connect directly with divine forces, offering something of personal value in exchange for blessings, protection, and guidance for the coming months. The atmosphere shifted from collective celebration to individual reverence, though always maintaining a sense of communal unity. The Archdruid positioned himself near the main altar, a flat slab of polished granite that reflected the dancing firelight like a mystical mirror. On this sacred stone, he had arranged a variety of ceremonial vessels, bronze bowls to receive liquid offerings, woven wicker baskets for grains and fruits, small iron cauldrons for objects that would be consumed by fire. Each vessel had been consecrated with water from sacred springs and fumigated with aromatic herbal incense, preparing them to receive the offerings with proper spiritual purity. Families approached the altar in order of traditional precedence, starting with the most respected elders of the community. An old retired druid, his white hair shining like silver in the firelight, was the first to approach. In his trembling hands, he carried a small glass flask containing golden honey from his own beehives. As he poured the honey into one of the sacred bowls, his hoarse voice murmured a prayer of gratitude for the sweetness of life and a plea that his accumulated wisdom would continue to benefit the community in the coming year. An elder woman approached next, carrying a small linen bag containing carefully selected seeds from her personal garden. These were not common seeds. They had been saved from the best plants of the last harvest, chosen for their vitality and growth potential. As she placed the seeds in one of the sacred baskets, she offered a prayer for the fertility of the earth and the abundance of future harvests. Her words carried the weight of decades of experience working with the land and understanding its cycles. The community's artisans offered examples of their finest work. A blacksmith laid down a perfectly forged small bronze blade, symbolizing his dedication to excellence in his craft. A weaver offered a piece of fabric embroidered with intricate Celtic patterns, representing her skill in creating beauty from simple materials. A potter presented a small ceramic bowl decorated with spiral symbols, demonstrating her ability to transform common clay into objects of utility and beauty. Young mothers approached carrying offerings related to the protection and well-being of their families. One offered a small amber amulet that had belonged to her own mother, asking for protection for her children in the coming year. Another placed a braid of her own hair, symbolizing her willingness to sacrifice part of herself for her family's well-being. A third offered fresh milk from her best goat, representing the sustenance and nourishment she provided as a mother and caregiver. Young warriors and hunters presented offerings related to courage and skill in their activities. Carefully crafted spearheads, flexible wooden bows, arrows with raptor feathers. Each object represented not only technical skill, but also the commitment to use these abilities to protect and sustain the community. Their prayers asked for courage in hunting, precision in war if necessary, and wisdom to distinguish between necessary and unnecessary conflicts. Children participated with simple, yet no less significant offerings. They offered toys they had made themselves, straw dolls, wooden carved animals, wreaths of dried flowers. Although their offerings were materially modest, they carried the purity of intention that only children possess. Their prayers, expressed in simple and direct language, often touched the hearts of the adults present. Requests for their pets to remain healthy, for their grandparents to live another year, for many opportunities to play and learn. In addition to material offerings, many participants made personal vows for the coming year. These vows were not empty promises, but serious commitments made before the community and the gods. A young man might promise to dedicate himself more intensely to learning a craft. A woman might vow to better care for an elderly relative. A man might commit to better controlling his temper. Each vow was considered sacred, a word given that should be honored lest divine favor be lost. The Druids also made their own special offerings, often related to knowledge and wisdom. They offered scrolls containing sacred poems, small crystals they had used in meditations, or ritual instruments that had served them well during the past year. Their prayers were complex and elaborate, invoking not only personal blessings, but also guidance to better serve the community and preserve ancestral traditions. Some offerings were made collectively by specific groups. The bards offered a new song composed especially for the occasion, its melody being sung for the first time during the ceremony. The artisans presented a collaborative project, perhaps a new tool for communal use or a decoration for the stone circle. The women collectively offered a large quantity of food, specially prepared to be distributed among the neediest families during the winter. As each offering was presented and each vow pronounced, the Druids responded with specific blessings, invoking the protection and guidance of the appropriate Celtic gods for each situation. Their voices blended in complex harmonies that transformed each individual offering into part of a great spiritual symphony rising to the heavens, carrying all the hopes, fears, dreams and aspirations of the community to the divine realm where they would be heard and, hopefully, answered. In the deepest hours of the night, when the cold intensified and the stars shone with greater brilliance in the crystalline sky, the Celtic community maintained its sacred vigil around the fire that continued to dance and crackle in the center of the stone circle. This was the most challenging and significant part of the entire ceremony, to remain awake and alert during the darkest hours, keeping alive the flame of hope and faith until the sun returned to mark the beginning of its ascending cycle. It was an act of spiritual resistance against the forces of darkness, a collective demonstration that light would always triumph over shadows. The Druids took turns keeping the fires burning and leading soft chants that helped the community remain awake and focused. Their melodious voices floated through the cold night air, intoning ancestral mantras that had been specifically developed to sustain spiritual energy during long vigils. These songs were not merely entertainment, they served as psychological anchors that prevented the participants' minds from wandering or succumbing to the natural fatigue of the late hours. As the night progressed, many participants entered deep meditative states, their bodies warmed by the fire while their minds explored internal spiritual territories. Some reported visions of ancestors who came to offer guidance and blessings. Others experienced sensations of cosmic unity, feeling connected not only with the present community, but with the entire web of life that extended through time and space. These experiences were not considered hallucinations or fantasies. They were seen as genuine communications with deeper spiritual realities. The younger children, who could not stay awake throughout the entire vigil, were carefully settled in temporary shelters near the circle, where they could sleep warmed by smaller braziers while still remaining within the sacred atmosphere of the ceremony. Their mothers took turns caring for them, ensuring they were comfortable and safe. Even in sleep, the children were considered active participants in the vigil, their pure souls contributing innocent energy to the collective ritual. During the coldest hours of dawn, warm drinks were distributed among the participants: aromatic herbal teas, spiced hot mead, nutritious broths prepared with animal bones, and seasonal vegetables. These drinks not only provided warmth and physical sustenance, they also contained specific ingredients chosen for their spiritual properties. Herbs like chamomile promoted mental clarity. Ginger stimulated circulation and vitality. Honey offered symbolic sweetness to sweeten the difficulties of the coming year. The bards told special stories during these deep hours of the night. Narratives about Celtic heroes who faced great challenges, legends about gods who brought light to the world, tales about the creation of the universe and the establishment of cosmic order. These stories served multiple purposes. They kept the listener's attention, conveyed moral and spiritual teachings, and connected the present experience with the rich Celtic mythological tradition. Each story was told with artistic mastery, using voice variations, expressive gestures, and dramatic pauses to maximize its emotional impact. Approximately an hour before dawn, when the Druids calculated that the sun was preparing to begin its ascent on the eastern horizon, the ceremony's energy began to transform again. Anticipation intensified, and a palpable excitement spread through the tired but determined crowd. This was the crucial moment for which the entire night of vigil had been a preparation, the triumphant return of light after the longest night of the year. The participants reorganized to face east, the direction from which the sun would rise. Those who had been sitting stood up, those who had dispersed regrouped into more organized formations. Musical instruments were again prepared, and voices were warmed with gentle exercises. The central fire was fed with fresh wood, so that its flames would dance vigorously during the climatic moment of the ceremony. When the first signs of dawn began to appear, a faint lightness on the eastern horizon, the distant singing of the first birds, a subtle change in the quality of the air, a murmur of excitement ran through the crowd. The Druids intensified their chants, their voices rising in complex harmonies that seemed to call the sun back to the world. It was as if the entire community was participating in an act of cosmic creation, helping to give birth to a new day and a new solar cycle. The exact moment of sunrise was marked by an explosion of joy and celebration. When the first golden ray appeared on the horizon, cutting through the darkness like a spear of divine light, shouts of jubilation echoed through the stone circle. Musical instruments burst into triumphant melodies, voices united in songs of victory, and dancers began to move in circular patterns that mimicked the sun's movement across the sky. The rising sun painted the sky with spectacular colors: pink, orange, gold, red, creating a visual spectacle that seemed to confirm the divine nature of the moment. Its rays stretched across the landscape, illuminating the ancient stones of the circle, warming the faces of the celebrants, and dissipating the shadows of the night. It was as if the entire world was being renewed and purified by the returning light, washed clean of the past year's darknesses, and prepared for a new cycle of growth and possibilities. As the sun fully rose above the horizon, definitively establishing the beginning of its triumphant return, the community knew that they had successfully fulfilled their part in the great cosmic pact. They had kept the vigil, preserved the flame of hope, and witnessed the eternal miracle of light's return. The winter solstice had passed, and although winter would still last several months, everyone knew that from that moment on, each day would be a little longer, each night a little shorter, until spring returned to awaken the earth from its hibernal sleep. When we contemplate these ancestral winter solstice celebrations, we are touched by a profound wisdom that transcends the barriers of time and connects us with fundamental aspects of the human experience that remain unchanged through millennia. The Druids and their Celtic communities understood something that our modern society, in its incessant pursuit of linear progress and technological control, often forgets: the vital importance of living in harmony with natural rhythms and finding spiritual meaning in the eternal cycles that govern all existence. The Druidic solstice celebration was not merely a feast or a religious ritual. It was a collective reaffirmation of the fundamental connection between humanity and the cosmos. In an era when people lived much closer to nature, they intuitively understood that their well-being depended not only on their own actions, but also on their ability to align with the greater forces that governed the universe. The solstice represented a moment of cosmic renewal that offered the opportunity to also renew personal and communal commitments. This ancestral wisdom resonates deeply in our contemporary world, where many people feel disconnected from natural rhythms and lost amidst the complexity of modern life. The Druidic celebration reminds us that there is a time for activity and a time for rest, a time for external growth and a time for internal reflection. The winter solstice, marking the point of greatest darkness before the return of light, symbolizes the importance of accepting and honoring the difficult periods of our lives as necessary parts of larger cycles of growth and renewal. The Druidic emphasis on community and collective participation offers valuable insights for our often fragmented and individualistic society. The solstice celebration was not a passive event where people simply watched a performance. It was a participatory experience where every community member had an active role to play. This inclusive approach created a sense of belonging and shared purpose that strengthened social bonds and provided emotional support during the most challenging periods of the year. The respectful relationship the Druids maintained with the natural world also offers important lessons for our era of environmental crisis. They saw nature not as a resource to be exploited, but as a sacred entity worthy of reverence and protection. Their ritual practices involved giving something back to the earth, offerings, prayers, conscious care, in recognition that humans were part of a larger, interdependent web of life. This integrated ecological perspective could inform more sustainable approaches to our relationship with the environment. The Druidic tradition of preserving knowledge through oral transmission also invites us to reflect on how we value and share wisdom in our digital age. While modern technology offers powerful tools for storing and accessing information, the Druidic approach emphasized the importance of internalizing knowledge deeply, allowing it to become part of one's very essence. This form of learning created a more intimate and transformative connection with ancestral wisdom. The Druidic concept of sacred time, special moments when the veil between worlds became thinner, offers a valuable alternative to our modern perception of time as a uniform, linear sequence. Recognizing that there are moments of greater spiritual and creative potential can help us live more consciously and intentionally, better utilizing the opportunities for growth and transformation that arise in our lives. The Druidic integration of art, spirituality, and daily life also offers inspiration for our often fragmented age. For the Celts, music, dance, poetry, and craftsmanship were not just forms of entertainment or personal expression. They were spiritual technologies that facilitated connection with deeper realities. This holistic approach suggests ways to bring more beauty, meaning, and transcendence into our daily activities. Perhaps the most profound lesson we can draw from the Druidic solstice celebrations is the importance of maintaining hope and faith during the darkest periods of our lives. The nocturnal vigil that the Celts kept during the longest night of the year was an act of spiritual resistance against despair, a collective affirmation that light would always return, no matter how deep the darkness. This message of resilient hope is especially relevant in our times of global uncertainty and personal challenges. By reflecting on these ancestral traditions, we are invited not to romanticize the past or reject the benefits of modernity, but to integrate ancient wisdom with contemporary realities. We can create our own versions of seasonal celebrations that honor natural cycles, strengthen our communities, and connect us with deeper dimensions of existence. The eternal echo of sacred cycles continues to resonate through time, offering guidance and inspiration to all who are willing to listen to its timeless message of renewal, hope, and cosmic connection.